What's going on, Tamers? East here, and this video has been kind of a long time coming, to be honest. When BT15 dropped in Japan, they released new Tintamon support, and Tintamon was one of my favorite Digimon growing up watching the show, and I had to jump right on the deck immediately. I had so-so results in that environment. It feels like the deck was still missing a couple of things, so I was overjoyed when BT16 released new TyrantKabuterimon cards and the support for that line as well. So this video is going to showcase my deck profile for BT16's TyrantKabuterimon. What I really enjoy about this deck is that whether you're a beginner or an advanced player, it's really easy to wrap your head around what this deck does. It just simply builds a big Digimon that is almost untouchable. Many of the new cards in the Tintamon line sport the very powerful defensive effect that when they're rested, they cannot be affected by your opponent's Digimon's effects. Options are still on the table, but those are pretty far and few between. That, combined with the myriad of ways that Green has to buff up your Digimon, gives you lots of simple answers to many of the problems you're going to face in this environment. So with that said, let's take a look at the cards in the deck, a couple of insights, and some ways that you can make the biggest baddest bug on board. The name of the game for this deck for me is Control, and I do that with two Digitama here. The first one going to be 3 copies of the EX5 Nyaromon, where if he's rested on either turn, you get plus 1000 DP. Just help me make a bigger Digimon at the end of the turn, and then I'm going to have 2 copies of the BT15 Motimon, who lets me attack at the end of the turn if I have an insect-type Digimon. Because I always want to end my turns with my Digimon rested, Motimon is a way for me to Digivolve into a bigger Digimon with a higher DP that is more likely to survive whenever it swings. Moving on to the level 3s, our first one's going to be 4 copies of the BT15 Tintamon. This little fella does everything we want him to do in the deck. He buffs up our Digimon, he rests a Digimon on the board, and in Inheritance he gives us a small memory refund whenever we destroy another Digimon on either turn. Our next level 3 is going to be 4 copies of the BT16 Kabuterimon. Every deck needs a good searcher, and he lets us search deep into the deck, looking at 4 cards at a time and grabbing any insect. And then his Inheritance effect, which gives us the both turns plus 1000 DP if he's rested, is just welcome addition to any card in the deck. My next level 3 is actually going to be 2 copies of the BT9 Pomumon, who stops your opponent and you from playing Digimon by an effect. And when we get to level 6s, it might seem kind of strange why I'm running this card, but sometimes it's good to set up your board and then drop a Pomumon so that your opponent can't do the same thing on their side. In this case, he's just a useful defensive tech against some of those decks that like to play Digimon by effects. And while many of the effects that I've talked about thus far have been focused on defense, this last set of the level 3s actually focuses on offense, where I want to be able to make swings pretty quickly so that I don't drag the game out too long with my big bug and give my opponent a chance to come back. And that's going to be through the use of one of the ST17 Double Typhoon starter deck Lopmon cards. And he's going to give one of your Digimon the Alliance effect, and you can just rest him for the effect and make your already massive TyrantKabuterimon even bigger and check for 2 hits. It's very rare that you would actually Digivolve into this guy, but in the off chance that you do end up doing that, he also has that nice both turns effects where whenever he's rested, you get 1000 DP. So rising up the ranks, next we're going to take a look at the level 4s for the deck. The first one's going to be 4 copies of the BT16 Blade Kawagamon. This guy is all about buffing up our Digimon on board. Whenever he's played or Digivolved into, you can give one of your Digimon plus 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn. Very important, into the opponent's turn, not just yours. And then in Inheritance, he's got the nice effect that whenever he's rested, the Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. That's an Inheritance effect we're going to see a lot in this deck, just so we can always make sure we have the biggest Digimon around. Also keep in mind, while his type might say that he's a machine, he has the nice special rule box that says that he counts as an insect type, so all the effects in this deck pretty much apply to him as well. Next up, we're going to have 4 copies of the BT9 Kawagamon X Antibody. This guy is just to give us a little bit more pressure on our opponents by giving your insect type Digimon he's under the Inheritance effect of piercing. This way, while you're controlling your board and cleaning up their Digimon that are left around, you have the ability to also check security at the same time. And rounding out our level 4 is going to be 2 copies of the Promo Kawagamon. Now he does a couple of things that I think are really interesting. The first is that whenever he's played or evolved into, he can lock a Digimon or a Tamer into a rested position for an entire turn. In some cases you may need to get a couple more draws, and in this case, he's a great way to get a 0-cost Digivolve into your Kawagamon X Antibody. And in Inheritance, he's got the simple but very useful effect of buffing your Digimon by 2000 DP. As we look at the level 5s for this deck, you really have a ton of different build options. Depending on whatever your playstyle is, whether you want to go for board control or cheap Digivolves or focus on offense, if you think something's going to work with this deck, in most cases it is going to work. Having said that, however, I do think that a staple for the deck is going to be 4 copies of the BT16 Metal Life Kawagamon. This guy has all of the effects in one card that were previously in separate cards that you had to build up over the course of the game. And because of that, this deck becomes way more streamlined. He has the Tintamon's effect, but on play or on evolve, not just the start of the main phase, where you can rest a Digimon and give something plus 3000 DP. And then he has the Izzy Tamer's effect in Inheritance, where you can redirect one of your attacks into one of your rested insect-type Digimon. So no matter what way you're going to build the deck, I always recommend having 4 copies of this guy. Taking a look at my next level 5, you'll see that I like to have a nice balance between control as well as low cost Digivolves, and that's going to be using 3 copies of the BT7 Rhino Kabuterimon. For me, it just feels nice getting into my TyrantKabuterimon for only 3 costs, where his normal cost is much higher than that, and the fact that I can do it while attacking means that I can be offensive or take down an opponent's Digimon and get my TyrantKabuterimon's effect at the same time before my turn ends. And my last level 5 for the deck is going to be just a single copy of the BT16 Mega Kabuterimon Ace. I don't like to run too many Ace cards at level 5 because I do run a couple at the level 6, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But he's really useful. Again, a Blast Digivolve off of one of your level 4s. He also gives you plus 3000 DP, and he can redirect an attack. On top of that, if he's rested, he does get the nice protection from the can't be affected by your opponent's Digimon's effects, so might save you in a couple of cases. Honestly, it's hard to say if I would cut this guy for one more copy of the Rhino Kabuterimon, just because I love seeing Rhino in my hand and being able to get to a TyrantKabuterimon so quickly if I do have him. But I think that the Blast Digivolve is also useful in certain circumstances where your opponent thinks that they can swing over one of your Digimon. You have the option of just gaining plus 3000 DP and then surprise killing them. And finally, we come to the level 6s for the Digimon. And the first one is going to be, no surprise, 4 copies of the BT16 TyrantKabuterimon. And this guy is the king of the deck. 14,000 DP. He is a 6-cost Digivolve from a level 5. That's why you see now that the Rhino Kabuterimon is actually very, very useful in cutting that in half. On Evo, though, he's going to let you play another bug Digimon from your hand at cost -8, which is very, very useful because it's most of the deck. I think with the exception of maybe Rhino Kabuterimon, who's a 9-cost, you can pretty much play anything else. And then at the end of the turn, you can rest one of your Digimon, and that rested Digimon's DP, one of your opponent's Digimon with equal or lower DP can be bottom decked. Keep in mind, TyrantKabuterimon does have the very coveted, not affected by Digimon effects whenever he's rested, so if you've got him on the board and you've got maybe like a Metal Life Kawagamon underneath him in sources, you can just redirect attacks into him, and most of the time, because he's like 14,000 plus like 3,000 from one of your other Digimon, or 2,000 from an inheritance effects, he could be like a 17 or 18,000 Digimon on your opponent's turn. Very, very difficult to climb that mountain sometimes. Our next level 6 for the deck is going to be 2 copies of the BT16 Grand Kawagamon Ace. This guy is very valuable Tamer destruction, which green typically doesn't have access to, because this guy is green-purple. He also lets you rest 2 cards on your opponent's side of the board, whether it's Digimon or Tamer, and then they cannot unrest at the start of your opponent's active phase next turn. And then finally, he has that nice little bit of extra offense by giving one of your Digimon secure attack +1 whenever he's rested. So with the added offense power as well as removal, this guy is the perfect addition to TyrantKabuterimon. I actually do run one more level 6 in this deck, and it's going to be one single copy of the BT8 Shivamon. And honestly, this card sometimes feels a little bit gimmicky, but it does have, I guess, potential to lock your opponent in some cases, where if all of your Digimon are rested on your side of the board, your opponent cannot use option cards. And because your opponent can't use options, and your TyrantKabuterimon is immune to Digimon effects, it makes it virtually impossible to remove him off the board. Keep in mind though, in many cases, the Shivamon can also have the added layer of protection of using either your Metal Life Kawagamon inheritance effect or your Izzy Tamer to redirect attacks into your TyrantKabuterimon so that he can be protected. However, he is affectable by your opponent's Digimon's effects, so he could be like the target on board for them to go for. But I think the biggest payoff for this guy is whenever he becomes active during your unsuspend phase, where whenever that happens, your opponent has to just discard as security, helping you close games out a little bit faster. But yeah, I will say after playing with this guy for a bit, he does sometimes feel a little bit gimmicky. Maybe I might want to run maybe a 3rd Grand Kawagamon Ace, or maybe even a Hercules Kabuterimon for BT15 instead. Honestly, try it out. I think it's an interesting tech card, but I wouldn't rely on this strategy too much. As we move along to our option cards, this deck actually does run a pretty wide variety of different options. The first one is going to be 3 copies of the Green Agility Training card, letting you search for the deck and then refund that memory by reducing a Digivolve cost on later turns with a delay by 2. The next option is also going to be one of the Searcher class options, the Green Memory Boost here, letting you search a little bit deeper for 3 costs, search 4 cards, and then later on get 2 memory back from a refund. The next option is going to be the mandatory green staple of 1 copy of Hidden Potential Discovered. Because TyrantKabuterimon is a very, very costly Digivolve for 6, being able to reduce it by 5 is actually really useful, and you can rest one of your Digimon at the same time. In cases where you don't have a Rhino Kabuterimon and you have to use the Metal Life Kawagamon and then evolve into the level 6, this is pretty useful. Our next single copy of an option card in the deck is going to be 1 copy of the BT15 Super Shocker option. It's 2 costs, which is great. It gives one of your Digimon plus 3000 DP, and it lets you rest one of your opponent's Digimon who are level 6 or lower. That resting effect is also so important, because there are some times where your opponent will try to play around you and just leave their Digimon active, which makes it much harder for you to establish that control on board. This card gets around that by forcing them to rest, and then with the buffed up Digimon, you can just punch into them to take them out. And then finally, we have 1 copy of the removal option Shine of B. Sometimes you just need a good removal card, and at 7, it is kind of expensive, but if you do hit an ace card, it becomes much more tolerable. It lets you rest 2 Digimon, and then all of your opponent's rested Digimon with the lowest DP get bottom decked immediately, and then it gives you plus 3000 on something until the end of your opponent's turn. So again, removal and buffing your Digimon all in one package. And finally, we come to the Tamers in the deck. This deck does run 2 kinds of Tamers. When I first made it, it actually ran 1, but because of the way the meta is right now, I have to run 2. First one's going to be 3 copies of the BT15 Izzy card, letting me get 3 memory at the start of every single turn, and I can redirect attacks into one of my bug Digimon once per turn. And the final tamer for the deck is going to be 2 copies of the Digimon Emperor card because I hate Ukomon and he is everywhere right now. And it also stops some of the stronger level 3 effects. You can just tax your opponent for pulling level 3 out immediately, and it might make them think or make them stall another turn in order to get to a bigger Digimon to come out with level 4 instead of the level 3. Additionally, whenever you do destroy something, you get an extra card draw, and because this deck is pretty good at punching things to get them off the board, he fits in pretty well. So now let's take a look at actually how to play the deck. And honestly, I think it's pretty straightforward. Early turns, you're going to want to just get into, level 3 or level 4 and raising. Meanwhile, you have lots of options to dig through the deck in things like the Kabuterimon for searching, or, a green memory boost, or even your agility training. If you have the time and the memory, you can also play something down like the Digimon Kaiser, or you can set up an Izzy. Honestly, I prefer to play Izzy later on when I already have my TyrantKabuterimon established on board. I can commit one of these to him to really control out things and make sure my opponent has to swing into me and I keep my security safe. But your early game plays are going to pretty much look like this. Let's imagine a situation where instead of the Nyaromon that we had in Raising before, we have like a BT16 Motimon instead. And our opponent passes us over 2 memory and we've got like 1 training card set up. You can actually pretty reliably get to your level 6 in this way. You pull out your Tentomon, he's going to buff himself by 3000, and you can rest something on your opponent's side of the board, which you can later swing into thanks to the Motimon's effect. We can spin the delay here and go into something like the Quagamon X Antibody for free, and he's going to give us the Inheritance Piercing. Then for 3, we can go into the Rhino Kabuterimon here, and because it's end of turn, we rest an opponent's Digimon, we can actually swing into them with the Rhino Kabuterimon here, so he can do that. And then on swing, he can Digivolve for 3 into the TyrantKabuterimon here, which puts our opponent at 4. TyrantKabuterimon can drop, a Digimon on the board, whether that be a, Blade Kawagamon or maybe a Metal Life Kawagamon. Honestly, I prefer the Metal Life Kawagamon here just because it's so much better, giving you plus 3000 extra DP, and he can rest something else if it exists, or if you don't have that, then of course go for level 4. Then when you kill your opponent's Digimon, or you take out your opponent's Digimon, you're going to get the memory refund from the Tentomon here, going back to 3, so you lock them at 3 for the turn, and you have the piercing effect off of the TyrantKabuterimon. If anything else on the board is left over, and it's not that big, you can rest the Blade Kawagamon here and try to bottom deck it if the DP works out. And yeah, that's one single turn, and you've already established with just 2 memory, you've got to your level 6 boss monster and something else on the board. And then you could use, potentially, the Mega Kabuterimon Ace here if your opponent tries to swing over this guy. He is pretty tantalizing at just 4000 DP. From there, once you've got your board established, whether your opponent puts you at 1, 2, or 3 memory, you really have a lot of options either way. With just 1 memory, you can do something like a Super Shocker here to buff up your TyrantKabuterimon for a turn and then rest something, then use the Motimon's effect to swing into something afterward and get rid of it, and then get the check from the console and the memory back, putting you at like 0. That's really nice, and then you can continue your turn and finish up with whatever you want, like a Digivolve here, maybe into, the Metal Life Kawagamon, something like that. You can also, at the start of the turn, once you hatch your second egg, you can optionally go into a Lopmon here, so you can set up the alliance for the following turn in order to get extra swings. And once you've got the level 5 set up, you also have the option of going into a second TyrantKabuterimon, which honestly is just GG's if your opponent, sees this. If you have 2 up, it's almost impossible for your opponent to win. Or you can hold on to the level 5 here, Metal Life Kawagamon, and then just keep the ace in your back pocket for Tamer Destruction, resting Digimon, and then getting this extra security attack +1 on your TyrantKabuterimon already on the board. And then if you're really struggling to find a way to cap off a turn, and you've got 2 or 3 memory to work with, then an Izzy Tamer is always just a good insurance package so that your opponent has to redirect into your TyrantKabuterimon multiple times, whether it's through a Metal Life Kawagamon effect or his effect. So overall, the deck is pretty simple to play, gives you lots of easy answers to many of the threats out there in the game right now, and it's pretty fun to do so. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up my BT16 TyrantKabuterimon deck profile. Like I mentioned before, there are lots of ways to build this deck, and I've only shown you one. I'm sure you guys have your own ideas out there as well, and I'd love to read them in the comments below. I just got a couple of Michelin star level chefs out there cooking up something really good, so I'm interested to see what you guys come up with. Also, one last thing before I wrap this one up, I want to give a very sincere thank you to the folks who become official channel members here on YouTube. I really do appreciate your support every single month. Additionally, if you're not an official channel member, I recommend becoming one. You get access to my videos a little bit earlier than everybody else, as well as knowing that your money will be going to TOs for Digimon around the globe to help them make their events better. You can easily sign up to become an official channel member by going to my channel page and clicking the join button. And so with that, I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.